Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads and must converse is the channel. Thanks for coming by again. And today I'm gonna do a little more on my on the introduction to Buddhism, but we're getting away from the introductory, even though we still are in fundamentals of Buddhism. This is more fundamentals of Buddhism in the way that these are concepts that are true and prevalent in every school of Buddhism. They are fundamental to all Buddhist sects throughout history, no matter whether they were the first kind of cropping up of Buddhism in India and Nepal from the Buddha himself, or they are 1,500 years later in Japan, something like that. And so, and of course, now Buddhism has made its way around across the globe. Is in all countries. You can find Buddhist temples everywhere. So, I would say I want to preface this first by just driving home the knowledge that what we're dealing with in Buddhism is a belief system that grew up in a culture where reincarnation was just the way that it happens. There is no belief that there's no belief in a short-lived one lifetime and one and done kind of thing in Eastern religions. You're never going to, everybody is eternal. Everyone is eternal in Eastern religious beliefs. You might spend an immensely long time that you can't even wrap your head around how long it might be in a hell realm for just being so deluded and so much embracing evil or vice and evil mind states. But that is, you will burn that off, and you will then be ready again to enter into a birth, a way of an incarnation that is like an animal or something, and hopefully then you just become a little bit more and more refined until you can get another crack at being human. You know what I mean? That's the human state is very unique and preferable actually to all others, even though human state is a state of endurance and a state where there's much to be endured, and we suffer through a lot of hardship. Buddhism did reformulate the idea of reincarnation from the Hindu a little bit, just in the way of what is the underlying bit of you. The Hindu would say something very much in line with a modern day Christian who believes that maybe there is a little spark of God in everyone. There is a little spark, a little bit piece of God in everyone, and whether that is manifest outwardly or not, that is what is giving us our being, our ultimate ground of being. The Hindu would say that there is that little spark, that there is that Brahma. They call God Brahma. That is their word for God. Now in Buddhism, it takes away this kind of idea, not that there is no God that sees himself as creator of our realm and things like that, but it takes away the idea that there is something there that is unchangeable. You know, it could be argued in a Western way that God came, you know, entered into the into humanity in order to expand, in order to expand in ways that he couldn't without without this whole thing, without the whole creation. And so those are very high-minded concepts. They're hard to work into, and I'm not here to do that this video, but I just wanted to drive home the fact that Buddhism is a religion that is built on the predication that you're going to live millions and millions and millions of lifetimes no matter what you do. You're not going to do anything to break it. And the only question then is, what are you going to do with those lifetimes? What are you going to do with what we are? And of course, you know, you would say, I don't want to do this, you know, live like this millions and millions of lifetimes. This world is very much hard. And so that is the fundamental question that drove the Buddha to find his to search for answers, and then ultimately become an awakened, fully awakened being. And so the truth that everything is unsatisfactory, that is the first noble truth. We're going to talk about the Four Noble Truths a little bit, and then we'll talk about dependent origination. They are two fundamental concepts true to Buddhism. So the Four Noble Truths are, first, that the world is unsatisfactory. And I think everyone can agree with that. And, you know, I could expound on it a little bit. And it's just the kind of thing that we want things that don't come into our experience. We don't want things that do come into our experience. And very much of what is around and comes into our experience and that we have to deal with, we could care less about. There's a lot of indifference and a lot of apathy and things like that, when we would love to be, you know, content and happy all the time. And what does it take to do that? Well, you know, this world, this creation could never give it what would bring us a state of happiness all the time. Because things like, you know, if you have all this beauty and amazing life, you know, it's impermanent. That's why suffering is a baseline thing. Because of the three marks, you know, unsatisfactory, it's impermanent, and it lacks any inherent nature in and of itself that is lasting. That in Buddhism, that is called no self. It has no self of its own that is something that is will endure indefinitely or forever, you know. So those kind of things. Number two, the second noble truth is that there is an origin of suffering for us, and that origin is within us. The origin of suffering is not something that is put on us from outside. This creation, this world and things are of itself a huge, vast, immensely complex thing that is neither good or bad. That is just so much that it doesn't work to try to classify it into good, bad, or indifferent like that. The whole creation is vast. So the unsatisfactory nature, that part of life, comes to us, to our experience, from within. And it is because of a certain type of desire. The desire for things that we don't have. The desire to keep things that are fleeting, that are impermanent. The desire to not have things that we do have in our experience. That kind of desire. The wanting and desire for something that is not, or the not wanting something that is, that kind of thing. And that kind of thing comes down to perception, right? And so the third noble truth is that there is a way to stop suffering. See, the Four Noble Truths are actually translated many places as the fourfold truth, because it's one truth. It's the truth of suffering, but that truth is fourfold. And the third part is that there is a way that suffering will cease. There is a cessation of suffering. And what is that? The cessation of suffering is that we can give up that desire. We can end the kind of desire, the kind of perception that makes us not want what is in our experience, to want something that is not in our experience and think that that's going to make us happy. It's misplaced value. It is wrong perceptions and all that kind of stuff. It is inner attitudes, you know, in different kinds of ways that bring that suffering, and actually therefore we have all the control to stop that kind of thing. And the fourth noble truth is there is a path that leads to the cessation of suffering. And what is that path? The way to do that is 8 different things. So that is called the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path is something that that I'm not looking to go into today, because it is definitely going to be a video in and of itself. But it is working with the mind and with the personality, emotions and thoughts, working with the mind and the personality to see rightly what your situation is, where your power is in that situation, what you can do about it, and ultimately an acceptance through the way you conduct yourself in your life. Right speech, right action, right views, right livelihood, right thinking, right concentration, and right, there's others, just to say off the top of my head, but it's that kind of stuff, and I'll go into those a little more depth. But the underpinning to the Four Noble Truths is just that everything has the 3 marks to them. That is impermanence. That it is inherently unsatisfying, and that it doesn't have anything in and of itself that gives it a quality that is going to stay for forever, kind of thing. So, and then that's one side of the coin of the Four Noble Truths, and the other side is that there is a path that we can take to gain the right kind of viewpoint, the right kind of way of approaching life, where we move just only freer and freer and freer. And the Buddha said just that kind of thing, that just as all water, has the same taste, that of salt, my teachings, the teachings of enlightenment, have all the same flavor, and it is that of liberation, that of freedom. If it does not free you in some kind of way, it is not a true spiritual practice. And by that token, you can say as well that if something does free you, no matter what it is, if something does free you in your mind or in your heart, in your emotional states or in your personality, then it is spiritual practice. That is what spirituality truly is, becoming freer and freer and a freer being. In Western spirituality, the paradox with that is that ultimate freedom is not in running away, but it is in union with God. And it put that way seems like a paradox to a lot of people when they're approaching Western spirituality. And I get it, of course. But that is the teaching of the prodigal son. You know what I mean? The son is completely free to do what he wants to do. And in that way is going through a lot of suffering and hardship. And his ultimate freedom and liberation comes when he returns to his father's house. And just to show that kind of thing, that anybody can think of different conversations and different kind of things, ways that they've interacted with their religion and the ways that they've interacted with their scripture. And when you have those realizations that break you free of a place that you were limited and confined before, and you feel that freedom of a realization, that is the spiritual life. That is the spiritual path. That's what that's all that it is. That's what it's meant to do for you in your life. Practically. Over and over and over and over until you are completely free. And complete freedom is union with with the Spirit. Because the Spirit that is unknowable and pervading all, the all, is just that big. It's just that, I'm not trying to, get into describing that kind of thing. But just to stay on the practical element of path work. So I hope I gave you a good idea about Four Noble Truths with that. If there is any questions or comments or things like that, please just drop me a line in the comments. Specifics about Four Noble Truths, ask a question, and I will respond. And if it's big enough, then I'll make a video response. And we'll just make sure that we hash these kind of things out. The second thing I wanted to touch on is dependent origination. Now, this is seemed like a big subject, so I'm going to give a couple of examples of it, and then I'm going to give a very practical example, like in daily life, of how things work out. What is dependent origination? This is the words of the Buddha. And what, monks, is dependent origination? With ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formation as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the sixth sense basis. With the sixth sense basis as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. This, monks, is called dependent origination. So, you see, the words, the terms that are used are not great, are not perfect for the way that we use those terms in daily life today. So it would be easy, if I left it at that, for sure, and some intellectuals out there already are, hearing that and saying, well, that's not, that doesn't make any sense. Because how can you feel and crave and have contact, six sense bases, the six senses at their basis? How can you have that stuff before you have birth? And, looking at just our life and how we use those terms now, you would be correct. But let's dig into them a little bit. So, when it comes down to things like the contact, that is the first time that there is a subject and object seen. So all these kind of things that he's talking about here are inner states, inner mind states. And if we look at them in a way of how a being is born, actual birth, then it's very, very, very hard to work into, because those are ultimately so subtle. These states of mind are so subtle as to be before birth that we don't have any recollection of them, and couldn't unless, and I mean, even if you just meditate and get to that kind of state, or try to get to that kind of state during your whole lifetime, you're not going to be able to touch something that's subtle, more than likely. It's going to be a gift from God. It's going to be a gift from the Spirit to be able to even have an actual experience inside yourself of what that kind of thing is going to be, that subtlety of being, that is a volitional impulse that has no kind of real action as we can describe it, attributed to it. It's just a very subtle impulse, an impulse that gives rise to consciousness. Okay? So, I've heard it described like this. Robert Thurman is a very popular scholar in Tibetan Buddhism, and he gave a series of talks that was available on Netflix at least a few years back. And in those talks, he likens this kind of thing to the bacterium, like during the evolution of beings. So, all these bacterium, all these kind of single-celled organisms and things are going around just kind of eating who they meet, And there's a kind of thing where maybe they rub up against each other and they kind of like. There's a kind of, it's not even liking something, it's not even a feeling, it's before a feeling. There's something that is a precursor to beauty, a precursor to anything positive. It's even more subtle than a positive thing. It's that kind of thing that is this volitional impulse that leads to consciousness. And a consciousness is needed for body and mind to arise. Now, body and mind, and that would be the need, the thing that is needed for there to be the six senses. But any senses, of course, right? Because what are you going to sense things with if you don't have a vehicle, a body, a vehicle, in order to have a sense, in order to observe the world around you. So before there were those kind of things, so I think it's fruitful to kind of use this as mind exercise to go back that far and think, well, what if it is these, like a bacterium, like a little germ, and in Buddhist cosmology and Buddhist ways of thinking, we all have, and we all, everyone, there's no exclusion to anybody that is a human, that we have been through many millions of lifetimes before, where we were all different kinds of beings. And those different kinds of beings are the trees, are the bacterium, are all the different animals, are things that that gave us all different types of experiences to therefore become who we are. So with that, I want to go through some things that will just kind of clear it up a bit, perhaps, and please bear with me, because I'm just going to have to lay it out. Because the principle of dependent origination revolves in the form of a cycle, beginningless and endless, it would be more accurately represented like this. Unknowing, or ignorance of suffering, its cause, cessation, and the way, the Four Noble Truths. Knowing that what went before precedes what is to come after, and the principle of dependent origination. So that's just what ignorance is not knowing cause and effect, and not knowing that, everything has at its root the three marks. So we go after things that we think are going to make us happy and such, and we try to stay away from things that we think are causing our unhappiness and such. Sorry. Volitional impulses. These are bodily formations or intentional actions. Verbal formations or intentional speech. Mental formations or thoughts. And according to the Abhidharma, meritorious formations or good karma, and bad karma, non-meritorious formations, and fixed or unmoving formations. The Abhidharma is a huge psychophysiological treatise that is part of the Pali Canon, that is very, very complex and hard to work into if you're not part of Buddhist study and reading the sutras and getting into this framework to think. So I'm not going to go into the Abhidharma very much, because it's just very, very complex, and there would be way too much, to get into. The third step in dependent co-origination, consciousness. Consciousness through eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That is the six consciousnesses. The fourth step, body and mind. Feeling, perception, intention, attention. The skandhas of feeling, perception, and volitional impulses, body or materiality, the four elements, earth, water, wind, fire, and all forms that are dependent upon them. The six sense bases, that is the actual eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Contact, That is contact through the senses, through a sense. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. Number 7, feelings. That is not your emotions. When they say feeling in the cause of dependent origination, it is just a positive, a negative, or an indifference. Arising from sense contact. Just that initial, very subtle feeling. Either a positive, a negative, or an indifference. The next step is craving. That is a craving for sights, sounds, odors, tastes, bodily sensations, or mind objects. You crave stuff that you find as pleasant, and things that you don't see as pleasant, you kind of reject and try to move away from, right? Clinging. Number 9, clinging to sense objects. That is sights, sounds, odors, tastes, and bodily sensations. Clinging to views, clinging to rules and practices, and clinging to concepts of self. So clinging is not exactly, like I say, these words are not perfect. So clinging is more like deciding, making your mind up on something and being immovable, planting your flag on something, but a very, very subtle level of that. But it is that kind of thing. Becoming. Number 10, becoming. That's the conditions which lead to birth. Also realms of existence. Sense realm, the realm of form, and the realm of the formless. The formless realm is the ideas, the realm of mind. But through planting your flag on a certain belief, whatever, as subtle as I'm saying, that is the condition, or a condition, that leads to becoming. And the next is birth. The arising of all the sense bases. The rising of all the sense bases. Birth, the apparent or arising of things. This latter interpretation is used in explaining the dependent origination cycle in one mind moment. So these kind of things happen very, very quickly within the person. They are not something that anybody, any normal person can call out step by step by step. It is something that happens as, we are not just habitual in this kind of thing. We are habitual to it on such a primal level for, since beginningless time. So there is no